This is the Sales Whisperer Podcast, session 14. Do you really know who you're talking to? Welcome back, everybody. This is Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, and I have never interviewed two people in the same day, and I did. Last week, interviewed Kelly Perdue and Barbara Metzger. And my microphone was off. I had this wonderful little thing. If you listen to Kelly, it sounds like I'm talking like this. So I don't know. Got to plug in the old Rode Podcaster straight into the iMac 27-inch beast. So again, you'll hear my voice sounds kind of crazy, but hey, the show must go on. Barbara Metzger is an expert at personality assessments. We'll talk about the DISC, which most people are familiar with, but DISC has really evolved in the last 30, 40 plus years, and we get into that. So please pay attention to this interview. And I talk about how this was one of the tougher things for me to learn in my entire development and evolution as a professional salesperson. But understanding personality types, not only those of your prospects, but even yourself, is vital to becoming a professional salesperson. But there are little clues and cues you can pick up, even on the way somebody answers the phone, and we get into that in this interview. So another little tip. You know, when I listen to podcasts, I put it on my iPhone, and you have an option to play it at 1.5 up to double speed. And I listen to 99% of all podcasts that way. It speeds up, obviously, the time. There's a lot of dead air with pauses and whatnot. And Apple has done a good job of making the voices not appear too Mickey Mouse-ish. So try listening to that on all podcasts, but especially on Kelly Perdue's and this one with Barbara, because my voice sounds so weird. But again, thank you for listening. And here we go with Miss Barbara. Welcome, everybody. This is Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer. Today we have not a mind reader, a personality reader. How's that? Miss Barbara Metzger of MaxProductivity.com. How are you?
I'm doing great.
How long have we known each other? 8 years? Something like that?
At least 8 or 10 years, yeah.
Man, I'm coming back to Muscle Grounds. I'll be in Austin next month, so I'm fired up. I met Barbara through Wizard of Ads, good old Roy Williams. And Barbara's specialty is, from her website, maximize insights equals stronger equals increased productivity. Would you say, I mean, in a nutshell, you are an expert in personality assessments, right?
Yes, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Can you...
I'm sorry?
Can you elaborate for our listener on exactly what it is you do?
So for the last 23 years, I've been working with assessments. And I used them in connection with a lot of different things. But now I help businesses optimize the employees that they have, or I help them make the best pick of new employees, what would fit for the job, what would fit for the company, and let them know who they're hiring before they hire. So I've been using a variety of assessments for those 23 years because the longer I've done business, the more I'm convinced that there is no one assessment out there that can tell us who we really are.
Right.
And so I always use and recommend a combination of assessments so that we can get pictures from a various angle. Right. And my specialty is I know how to combine all of those and read between the lines.
So let's break this discussion into two parts. So one for the entrepreneur, right? Maybe even the solopreneur that maybe doesn't have a staff yet. And we can have a discussion about those with larger teams, right? Like you and I just talked yesterday with a client in New York, 70 employees maybe. You know, obviously companies with 1,000 employees. This was always one of the hardest things for me to internalize. Started learning, really applying myself to the profession of sales and really learning the science behind the art. Because people always say, "Oh, you're outgoing and funny, you're a people, and you should be in sales," right? And it's maybe that's true, but in reality, a professional salesperson treats it as a profession, and being able to, I always say, be empathetic, right? So it's not sympathy, but empathy is we can walk in the shoes of the prospect, right? We relate to them. So if we can figure out what makes them tick, right, and we can adjust our approach, our tone, we use. But I'm nowhere near your level of understanding. So what can a beginner do, or an entrepreneur or salesman just out there, trying to make quota? How do they to learn about personality assessments, and then how can they apply it to make money?
That's a really great question. One is to help them learn more about it. There's a lot, of course, on the market, etc. But I would recommend, because I believe in them, doing an assessment on themselves so that they can better understand not only themselves, but how other people may perceive them, because what they think they are sending out as a message may not be what the other person is receiving. Okay. So it's not what our intent is. It is how different behavior styles, how different people see the world, and how they would interpret what we're saying.
Okay.
So one, understand yourself.
Right.
And then based on, if you base it strictly on behavior style, the different behavior styles make buying decisions generally different. Like the soft-spoken people generally take a longer time to make a decision. They need to think about it overnight. They need to analyze it.
Right.
Louder people tend to make quicker decisions and more risky decisions. And that isn't true across the board. I hate generalizations, but that's just a snippet. But then you have all these other things about how we filter information and why we make decisions. And so there's going to be some people that make them based on recommendations from others. There's going to be others that make them on, wait a minute, let me see this one on myself and see if it really pegs me.
Right.
And then they begin to understand that, wait a minute, if we peg them 80 to 90% accurately, then we're going to also assess the people that they don't know in that same manner.
Right.
And so, yeah. Well, interestingly, I really loved what you said about, oh, you look and smell like a salesman. Of course you're a salesman, And reality is
and
that,
for the record, salesmen smell like beer and cigars and grass in the golf course, not marijuana. Okay, but go ahead.
and so what happens is that statistically, it is not about how we interact with the world. Statistically, it is what drives us, how we make decisions. And so the people that are driven to make efficient and effective use of their time, energy, and money, statistically, are the highest producing salespeople.
All right, so say that. I'm writing this down. Statistically, those that are driven to make better use of their time, energy,
and money.
All right.
And they are driven to if it is in their highest 3 drivers out of 6,
right,
they have a 92% chance of being in your top quartile. Especially if they treat the profession as it is, a true profession, and they learn where all they're effective, where all they need to learn to listen more, how they need to adapt. But they are by far your top salespeople, statistically.
Well, the nice thing was studying this, looking at assessments, the reason, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that it was saying that the reason assessments, at least for salespeople, is so accurate is because we know who the top salespeople are. And over the last 50 or 100 years or whatever, there have been a lot of tests, so this is very quantifiable. Whereas if I say, hey, Barbara, who's the best web designer, or who's the best landscape architect, or the best massage therapist? It's like, well, how do you judge that? But we know who the number one seller of Fords in Detroit is, or the number one seller of Harley Davidsons in Houston, right? So we can go test those people and say, okay, this is how the top people test. So these are so accurate, right?
Yes. That's one. And then another one that you mentioned a little bit ago, too, was that empathy. And that has to do with emotional intelligence. And so there's a lot of statistics, too, on emotional intelligence, whether it be in salespeople or across different industries. And you'll find that the giant companies that are managed and run by people with a higher emotional intelligence statistically outperform all the others.
Okay, so I want to get into all that, but talk to me about emotional intelligence, because I have a conventional understanding of it, but a lot to learn. I'm sure our listeners do too.
Well, first of all, emotional intelligence is not an oxymoron. So basically, it is that, of course, we have IQ. However, it is our emotional maturity, our ability to deal with people, and how we interact with people that is by far the greater element in success of a person in a lifetime.
Okay.
So what really, it's been around for decades. However, it was only in the 1992 or 95 when the book Emotional Intelligence came out, and that gave it a name that somebody just hadn't named like that, and Daniel Goldberg did that. And he really identified or brought it to the forefront, and it became a more common term. But the EQ is that ability, and there's probably a great number of companies out there. There's probably 4 or 5 big players out there that deal with emotional intelligence, and some of them measure it a little bit differently. But basically, it's that ability, know who you are, recognize and acknowledge your own emotions and your ability to control them as you deal with other people, and as you deal with life.
Right.
And that is what they're measuring when they're saying, what's the EQ? Is that ability, not only is recognizing it, dealing with yourself, controlling your own emotions, recognizing the emotions in other people, and appropriately responding so that you have a positive outcome.
So I guess the Steve Jobs book, do you know much about him?
A little bit. I'm sorry, I haven't read that book, but I would say that, yeah, he was fairly low on it.
That's what I was going to say, just based on what he explained. But conversely, I don't know, maybe he just manipulated everybody and he was really high. He played everyone's emotions.
I think that he is such a special case because I think that he was such a genius in so many ways,
right,
that other people would allow the behavior because they recognize the genius in him.
Have you seen a common trend with entrepreneurs? Have you tested a lot of just sole proprietors or business owners to be able to speak to that?
That one is that I took a long time deciding which assessment that I would use, and so what I am using is one out of a company in Canada because they have the world's largest database.
Okay.
And so what I generally do is that I can assess somebody, and then they will have a pool that we can run it against, such as, do you want to run it against the general population? Do you want to run it against business owners? Do you want to run it against people over 50? It all depends on how you want to run it.
Right.
The ideal is that we grow in emotional intelligence as we mature. That's the ideal. And
I don't have to, do I?
It would be a really good idea.
All right.
Okay, but you're not obligated to.
All right.
That so really, after people retire is when you see it start declining a little bit too, because their world gets smaller.
Okay. So are there ends? I mean, what have you seen with entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs? I mean, is it discernible? I mean, you say, hey, all right, successful entrepreneurs have a higher EQ?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It is that on some of the elements, yes, they will have a higher EQ because they have then that ability to go make them do whatever they don't want to do.
Okay.
And they will have greater empathy.
Okay.
At the same time, they may be lower, like on impulse control.
Okay.
Because they need to make decisions based on their gut.
Okay.
And so that ability can, so it's not that it's high in everything, it is depending on what their situation is.
So would you say, though, being able to make a decision based on gut, I mean, in a way, that's a strength for entrepreneurs and even leaders in general?
Absolutely.
Could be an indicator of a low EQ?
Not necessarily, because it is that they recognize and they have a history of making gut decisions that have proven right, and they're more in tune with when it's a gut decision and when it's an ego thing.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So let's go back to the old Bible, right? Good old, and you focus on the disc or its derivatives. Okay.
Yeah, I use a disc. I never use a DISC, which is a 4-quadrant behavior style.
Right.
And was back from the 1928 was when the modern version of it was.
Okay.
And there's probably 50 to 70 companies out there. So anytime you hear colors or animals or disc or 4 quadrants, it's really based on that 4-quadrant system of DISC.
Okay.
And I've been using that since 1990.
All right.
I never use that as a standalone anymore because it's sort of like we're onions. All of us are a little stinky at times, but anyway, it is. The behavior style is just that outside core. And we have so many more levels that impact who we are underneath that. But it is what we see and what we can identify.
Okay.
And it affects how we walk, how we talk, how we use our body language. There's going to be times when you meet somebody and it just doesn't quite feel right. It looked right, and but then when you walk away, you go, something didn't feel right.
Right.
Well, that's probably because they were adapting their behavior style. So they may have talked in a real loud voice and been very commanding of the room.
Right.
And in reality, that was just a behavior style that they adapted, and they didn't have all of the body language that went with it. And so there's a disconnect in your brain.
Okay.
So with the behavior style, I always include one that goes to another layer, and that is, how do we filter information? how do we make decisions? How do we talk to people? Because this is the level where the majority of people get irritated with the others. And actually, it is a great example. One of them, just one, is what they termed high traditional or high regulatory. And so basically, it is people that really love a place for everything and everything in its place.
Yep.
Plus, they love a system for following. Well, they are also tend to be willing to die for what they believe in, their belief systems.
Okay.
Now, you can see what can happen in the Middle East when you've got people with different belief systems that are willing to die for what they believe.
Right.
They're going to fight about it.
Right. Well, but can't we? Everybody can have different quotients or whatever, depending. Like maybe I'm laid back about what's for dinner, but maybe I would die for my college football team,
Right.
or something like that, right? Or how I'm going to work out. Somebody may have a messy home, but they could be very analytical at work, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
how does the amateur, assessment individual, the salesperson? For me, it was always, I'm your typical sales guy, right? Outgoing, I like to have fun. I can be disorganized, but I know what the heck I'm doing. And I run across somebody. I did high tech for years and years and years, and it would kill me meeting with engineers that
Yes.
would literally want to read the manual, right? Thank God I had systems engineers come along with me, and I'm like, hey, geek, meet my geek, and I'm going to go to lunch, and I'll be back after y'all read the manuals and adjust your pocket protectors.
Right.
Right. So what can that solopreneur, right, or this entrepreneur that's out here on bootstrapping, how can they get up to speed quickly, and learn this, and how do they adapt?
One, I guess the quickest way, whether you study anything or not, is watch the other person and see what kind of questions they're asking. If they want to know infinite number of details, sit back and start answering their questions, because they have a driving need to know all the details. And basically, the majority of people that are soft-spoken, in other words, they're going to be talking in more of a monotone or a soft way, they are going to need a lot of details.
Right.
And so quit trying to wow them with your personality,
Right.
and pull yourself back and go at their pace.
Right.
And then if you're soft-spoken and you're dealing with somebody that is bouncing off the room, pull your energy up.
Right. How accurate is it, the old look around their office, are there picture family, are there pictures of golfing and fishing outings, is it a mess office, is it immaculate? I mean, do those things hold true to give you an insight into
The majority of times there is some real truth to them.
Okay.
You will find sometimes people with messy offices will choose to meet you in the conference room instead. Because, or it can be a soft-spoken person that really doesn't want to build a personal relationship, and they don't necessarily want you seeing what their things are in their office. And so it is true that you can tell a lot by what their surroundings are.
So what salesperson then? What do they look for? If we're meeting in the conference room, can we check out clothing, jewelry, hairstyle? I mean,
well, yeah, generally you can, unless they're married to the opposite style that picks out all their clothes.
Which my wife does. And,
Yeah.
and I have 4 daughters. I walked downstairs last night. I was going to meet my wife, picking up one of my sons, and I came down, and 2 of my oldest girls, they both looked at me simultaneously and said, "Are you wearing that, Dad?" I'm like, "Well, I guess I'll go back upstairs and change." But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. They can really influence it. But basically, if they've got very loud colored clothes on, generally speaking, they're going to buy because they like you.
Okay.
If they are dressed extremely conservatively, then you better have all of your facts together.
Okay.
If they're wearing the same suit that they've been wearing for 30 years, then they're going to be a slow decision maker, and they're going to need a lot of details, but they're open and they're friendly, and you just have to, actually a good phrase for them is help me understand. In other words, if you ask for their help, they're very much a team player.
Okay. So that's 3. What's the 4th one?
That's that
conservative and a 30-year-old suit.
That's right. And then you have it can be stylish. It can be a little bit more edgy. But basically they have generally speaking, they have a handshake that just goes boom, boom. They'll shake your hand twice. It'll be real firm.
Right.
They'll have a strong voice, and they'll be dressed somewhere between conservative and funky. But
how do we tell that now? It seems like everywhere I go, it's super casual. Years ago, I was still in high tech, and I was selling to Google. And the first meeting I walked into, some 28-year-old kid meets me, literally wearing basketball gym shorts and a top. I mean, I thought he just got off the basketball court. And for the most part, everybody's casual, super casual. I mean, is that kind of blurring the lines, or can we still pick up some of these cues?
Those are harder because it still is the engineers in that group, the high C's. They are still going to, even though they may be dressed casually, they're still going to have structure to it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. But they did. I mean, he's got his MacBook Pro with him, and the stuff he brought to the meet was organized.
Yes.
And I did know it was an engineer I was meeting. I just didn't know it was like an 8-year-old showing up from gym class.
Well, and quite truthfully, that millennium generation in a lot of ways looks like they're blowing all of this stuff out of the water in all of the old paradigms, etc. But they really still have the basic behavior styles. They have the basic drivers. They're just much more attuned, actually, back to the emotional intelligence. Their age group is very much aware of what's good for the whole.
Okay.
And so because of that, then that is going to influence what the decisions that they make.
Right. That's the old generations, right? The pendulum, right?
Right.
Roy and Drew, right?
Drew, yep.
Mike Drew, got it up there on my bookshelf. Yeah, pendulum. Can you also pick up cues from, on the phone and via email? Because, so much is done remotely now, right? What can we pick up that way to help us understand who are we dealing with?
Well, on the phone, it's very easy because on the phone you can hear it in their voice. And if you have someone pick up the phone and they say, Barbara Metzger, it's fast, it's curt, it's to the point, it's direct, that's going to be a pretty high D. That's going to be that driver, that fast decision maker. If you have them pick up and they say, "Hi, this is Barbara Metzger. I hope you're having a good day. What can I do for you?" Well, then you got a cross between a talker and that team player, and you know that to relax a little because you need to have a personal conversation before you go into what you're doing. And then the person that answers and just said, "Well, this is Barbara Metzger," then they're very results oriented. They're that engineer type. Okay. So you have that soft spoken, that direct, and then that real personable one.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, after all these years, I just adjust. Like, I'll literally, you can tell, like, if it's a noisy background or whatever, but, you're right. I mean, I'll just answer, "This is Wes." Like, I'll just get right to it. But if they're very low, I mean, I'll slow down and even like, hey, Barbara, this is Wes, and you can just tell. So I'm glad you gave those specifics, because it's those little things, and it just takes time, right? I mean, I've had to consciously study this over the years to try to pick up, who am I dealing with on the line, or across the desk from me.
I think in some ways, it's easier to pick up on a telephone than it is across the desk.
Yeah.
Because across the desk, you're inundated with a whole lot of other clues and visual things. But if you just listen to their voice and the rate that they speak and their tone of voice, you can probably pick it out more accurately.
Right.
And that, and on emails, it's pretty easy in that those direct people are the very results-oriented people. It's going to be crisper. It has no fluff in it. And and it can be the one that you can misinterpret pretty easy. It can be the one that really annoys you.
Oh, yeah. So being just short and to the point doesn't mean they're in a bad mood. That's how they communicate.
It's how they communicate, and they might have been rushed for time, etc. Yeah.
I tell people that's why I do so much video. It's why blogging, like building out my website, is really to try to speak to all different types, because I don't have the patience, right? I don't want to answer all these questions, but I know they have to be answered.
Yeah.
So I give my prospects and potential clients the answers they want and let them kind of do it on their own. But, when you're going out in person, and I've sold everything. I've sold retail, real estate, high tech. Meeting the different types. And, I've got to say, that's why I just stress this so much. Because they say the numbers are roughly quarters, right? 25%, I'm like 28%, whatever. But basically, what I've learned is, you say if about 25% of the people that you ever meet, you're going to make the sale. Just really out of just connecting. They say if you ever meet somebody and you felt like you're lifelong friends, they probably have the same personality type as you, right?
Yeah.
So you're just going to hit it off. So then, another 25% is close to you. Mm-hmm. So you'll probably that sale at least half the time, right? But then the other half of the population, easily, you'll probably lose if just. And when I learned those numbers, I'm like, all right, I'm going to learn this personality stuff.
Yeah, because like for yourself, it's the engineer type that is your toughest relationship.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, the funny thing is, now, like after using Infusionsoft for so long, right, after 5 years, I've just, through osmosis, become good, right? And so I better handle those analytical types, even though I don't know, I'm not going to always hang out with them already. But I understand where they're coming from. I guess I'm more empathetic after 5 years of doing this, and I know their pain points. Okay, we do have this because it could be a deal stopper. But as the business owner, I'm wearing multiple hats. Like, I've got to adjust.
Right.
And I have to make sure that technical type's happy so they can tell the boss to go ahead and buy it. I always tell people, you're either growing or dying, right?
That's right.
So shifting gears in to the larger companies, like we were talking about yesterday, it's not a big company, but 70 employees, more than, a little 5-person
right.
real estate office or something. But, these people have never done assessments. What do you think their big gap is there? I mean, how opportunity do you think they're leaving on the table by just going along to get along versus structuring and understanding their people and being deliberate about how they interact and grow?
I think that what you will find is that a lot of times if they've got the same person interviewing and hiring people, they're going to be hiring people that are like them.
Sure.
So that's okay, except when you have the sales manager or the salesperson hiring the accounting person, and then you've got a real mismatch. So what happens is that a lot of times it depends on how they have structured the hiring process.
Okay.
Now, the downside to that can be that if they hire people a lot like them, let's say that they hire that outgoing, easy, great to go get a beer with person, then if their key customer happens to be the people that are in the IT world, then you're going to miss a lot of sales because there is a automatic miscommunication.
Right.
You may have some people that can adapt. So there's also, you can have somebody on your team that is different, and because you don't know how to tweak your communication with them, you may be losing 25 or 50% of their productivity. Statistically, in the United States right now, 30% of employees are actively disengaged. And what that means is that for some of them, they are going to be sabotaging your company. They're going to do it in passive-aggressive manner, generally speaking, or they may be turning in the hours that they didn't make, that they didn't use, and sabotage you. But then there's another third that are just disengaged. So you have 2/3, between 66 and 70% of the U.S. workforce is disengaged to some level or another. So
right,
that, when they're actively disengaged, it really means that they not only are no longer motivated, but they're really not still competent in their jobs because they're too unhappy.
Right.
The others are just still competent, but they're not energized, they're not motivated, and you've got a drain on your profitability.
Right.
And it's a direct proportion to, especially with a small company, it can really be it's a hidden drainer of profits.
So you're saying then assessments could help a manager better communicate and re-engage them, or help them just not bring on the duds in the first place?
Both.
Okay.
Yes. So, and it doesn't mean that you can engage everyone. It
Right.
does mean that you may be able to identify the people that are the unhappiest, and if you can't make them happy, they need to be allowed to go be successful someplace else.
Right. That's a nice way of putting it. Get your butt out the door.
Yep. And so, but there's others that literally, if you just communicated differently with them or treated them differently, you would see very much a difference. It may be that their strength is in something different,
Right.
and so you may be able to tweak. Like there's one company that I'm working with what they did is that they took one position and they split it into two different guys because both of them had strengths in certain areas. One of them in the big picture and the other guy in getting it done.
Yep.
And so they split that up, and it's just phenomenally different for the business and for the employee because they're doing what they love.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot, and it happens with me. I mean, the few times I've been a manager, I knew I was going to have trouble being a sales manager because I don't see fools, and I'm always self-motivated and always was at the top wherever I was. And then when I would get stuck with or whatever, inherit some laggards, it's just killed me.
Yeah.
But obviously, in the bigger companies, when people, their job to keep people engaged and staff the team. I always tell people, too, I mean, your number job is to recruit. Just like college sports, just like pro sports. Always looking for new. When you find
Yes.
a superstar, make room for them.
Right.
But when it's your job is to get more out of your people, I mean, these assessments are just valuable because, I'm reading a book now, Predictably Irrational. Very interesting. Guy's done a lot of studies, but saying money is the most expensive and least effective means of motivation, across the board.
Right.
Salespeople, I've always been money motivated, really just to it's the way we keep score. But doing a little thing, learning how to communicate with your people, maybe just a pat on the back, maybe taking them out to lunch, bringing in donuts on Friday, or having free premium coffee. Those little things can probably make the difference with some of these engaged people, right?
Absolutely. In fact, the majority of people that quit do not quit because of money. They
Right.
quit because they were not appreciated.
Right.
And to change the things that make them feel appreciated and make them feel valuable is significantly cheaper, generally speaking, than it is to keep throwing money. And by the way, you phrased it so good that money. You said something about the money being the motivator, or that's how you keep score.
Right.
That's how high utilitarians keep score. It is not how somebody that's a very low utilitarian keeps score. They're going to keep score. Basically, may keep score on how much they help other people or they help society.
Right. And that's one of the tests, right? Utilitarian.
Yes.
Yeah. I've always talked with people when I'm consulting with clients. I tell them quite often, go look at a network marketing, an MLM type company.
Yeah.
That's why they have 10 or 12 or 25 different levels. You're an executive director, executive regional director, executive Ruby Diamond, Ruby Black Diamond executive director, and they're always coming up and they're getting pins and they're getting plaques, and they're getting trips for that recognition. And, and I said, I see that 30% and 66% because I see people just hitting me up. come join this, go that my poor wife, she's been to like 3 parties in the last 2 weeks just from friends, come see.
Right.
But if they have that much energy and drive to work that hard at night, I mean, if they were engaged at work,
yes,
they'd make more money, have more job satisfaction, and society, the economy would turn itself around right there. But if nothing else, companies figure out what little pins or something you can give people to keep them around.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, hey, we're coming up already. Wow, 40-something minutes. What would you... There's Matthew. Matthew, come say hello to Miss Barbara. And say hello to the podcast.
What's up?
What's up? That's the elaborate eloquence of 15-year-old. But at least he did the yard. High five. I'll be done in like 2 minutes. Oh, we have leg day today at the gym. I think he's throwing down the gauntlet. I don't know how these kids keeps me young or makes me old, but I can still lift more weights than them for the moment.
Yeah, it is for the moment.
For the moment.
They're waiting for that moment.
They're coming on, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So what are some reasons? Where can we send people? Do you work with individuals? Do you just work with companies? Where can people learn more about you and what you offer?
My in-process redone website.
I think we're all working on our website.
I know. It's maxproductivity.com. But that, it basically is, I work with individuals. I also work with companies. A lot of times the executive teams are the teams that are the ones to help them better understand and deal with their specific teams. And so I work with a variety. The majority of time, it's probably with business owners with 150 or less employees, but that isn't, I've dealt with them with thousands too in particular departments.
Right.
And so it's, my website, and give me a call and check it out, and I can answer questions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you in a month.
Yep.
And we will have published up on the website here shortly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Did you notice the way Texans say bye? Bye. Kind of like the oil business, when you have to make short words long and long words short. We're in the oil business, It's not the oil business. So I hope you got a lot out of that. Go back and listen to that a few times. Take Barbara up on her free consultation. But assessments are vital for yourself, for your company, to grow, to understand what makes people tick, to understand what makes you tick. And as always, if you like this, please leave a 5-star rating on iTunes and leave a few kind words on the website, on this podcast. It's session 14. Look down on the bottom there in the comments and leave a few kind words and invite your friends and family to listen. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in. Go out and make it a great day. Thank you for listening to the Sales Whisperer podcast at www.thesaleswhisperer.com.